Okay, I think we are live. So far, it's just me. So I don't know if I really want to just talk to myself tonight or not. So I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to see if anybody else joins live. It's okay if they don't. That just means nobody wants to do this, at least not on my channel. So that's fine. Oh, hi. Hi, Annette. Have one what? Thanks for joining me. It's just you and me for right now. Oh, I have one. You. So thank you for joining me. We're going to give it a couple of minutes. How was your day, Annette? I had a pretty decent day. I went and visited my mom, and who lives about an hour away, and took my 14-year-old granddaughter with me to go see her great grandmother. So we live in Florida, kind of near some natural springs and things. My mom lives 10 minutes from a natural spring. So we went and swam in the springs today, which was nice. My granddaughter's kind of tired at the moment. Yes, person here. I have one person here. So I appreciate you being here, Annette. It might be just you and me, and that's okay. I like having a discussion. However we do that, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 10, doesn't matter to me. So for the replay crew, if anybody watches on replay, and I do know there's at least one person in the UK who does watch these after the fact. So it's just not a good time for people in the UK. So for those who are just joining or who are watching on the replay crew, my name is Allison. This is Primal Scream, and we are about to dive into the second part of Jenna Miscavige's book, Beyond Belief, My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape. So we're going to dive into that. Annette says, I asked her how her day was, and she says, pretty good. The past 2 days, I had my granddaughters visiting, so I'm a little tired, but it was fun. I totally understand that. You said you have, how many granddaughters do you have, and how old are they? You don't have to give just the range. You don't have to tell me exactly. I have 2 granddaughters. They are 14 and 11. I just have the 14-year-old with me right now. And then I have 5 other grandchildren. They're all boys from age 20 down to twin boys that are 3. So I have a past little grandchildren. They were actually all here on Saturday enjoying the pool with us for a little bit. So that was nice. I bet you are tired. My granddaughter's tired from swimming in the springs today. I am too, a little bit. So, all right, well, I'm just going to get going. Keela may show up at some point. I know she was going to really try to be here this week. So we'll see. I don't know if notifications are going out or not. We all know that YouTube is fickle about that. Some people get them, some people don't. So I had 12 grandkids in total, 6 girls and 6 boys, ranging from 27 to 8. Had the 4 youngest. Oh, you're going to have to do 2, aren't you? I don't like that YouTube limits how many characters you can put in a comment. Oh, you had the 4 youngest, all the granddaughters. Wow. Wow. I only take, when it comes to the littles, I have the twin boys are 3. I have a 6-year-old grandson, an 8-year-old grandson, and then 11 and 14-year-old girls, and then a 20-year-old grandson. The little boys, after the girls, I only take 1 at a time. I can't manage them more than that. I can't do it. I have a disabled husband at home, a dying dog at home. I just don't have enough eyes and ears and hands to deal with more than 1 at a time and try to keep everybody happy and safe. So, all right, well, let's dive in. Annette, just tell me real quick, do you have the audio book? Do you have a paper book, whether paperback or hardback? Did you use Kindle? What was the medium that you used? I got actually the hardback because I cheated and found it on sale at Thrift Books because I'm on a very, very limited budget and I needed to be able to limit what I was spending on Kindle. I don't have a Kindle. I actually have a Kindle app on my phone, but I can't use it because like, I had to tell my mom because we got my mom a Kindle, but she's 86 and I had to set up the account as if it was my account on her Kindle so I can purchase books for her from afar since I'm an hour away. She's very independent and active, but it's just, I have to help her with some of the technology. So if I want to use Kindle, I have to tell her I'm logging in because then she can't log into the Kindle. So we try not to do that. I just use books most of the time. So she likes Audible too. She uses a lot of books on audio as well. So I'm assuming you have read Annette at least through chapter 21. We're going to cover 11 to 21 today. last week we talked a little bit about just how stoic Jenna is and how the writing is just very, very matter of fact. And that there's very little emotion. And I think that might be on purpose to portray how in Scientology you're not supposed to have emotion, but it's really really interesting the way that it's written. And it says, I have Kindle Unlimited, and it is available in that. If you don't know how that works, for $10 a month, I can read as many books as I can if they're in unlimited. Yeah, we have something like that with Kindle on my mom's, but like I said, I can only be, either I can be on my phone on my Kindle app, or she can be on the actual Kindle. We can't both be on at the same time. We tried that, and when I logged in, it logged her out. So, and you were up to chapter 22. Excellent. Perfect. So that's what we're going to, I haven't read chapter 22 yet. I've only gone through 21. So you're right on target. That's awesome. So I wanted to start with, if you have your Kindle handy on page, okay, you don't know this because you weren't here last time. I'm old. These are progressives, but these are 2 years old, and my reading part doesn't really work right anymore for me. So I have to take these off to see my book, but I can't really see the screen. So I have to kind of go back and forth like an old person, because I am one. Okay, so I wanted to start with page 128, right at the beginning of chapter 11. It just struck me that just a few sentences down, Jenna said, you know, she had been able to be with her mom quite a bit in the first section. She was able to go to Clearwater and stay with her mom and all that. But she said it was really hard to go back to the deck work and the drudgery after my taste of freedom at Flag, because she had quite a bit of freedom at Flag considering the situation. And so for her to go back to the ranch and having to you know, dive into that drudgery, as she called it, drudgery. I hate that word, but it's hard to say, drudgery. And to go back to the deck work, you know, that was hard for her. I can't imagine, because she was so young, and you know, she's still a child, even though they weren't really allowed to be children or act like children. She's still a child, and she got to taste some of that freedom. And now she had to go back and, you know, go back to ranch work again, which is just, to me, is sad. A lot of this book makes me sad, and what doesn't make me sad makes me really, really angry, typically, so far. So do you have any thoughts about her transitioning, going from Flag and all the freedom she had back to, you know, having to go back to the ranch and do the hard drudgery stuff? You know, that I know that I can't remember in this section. Let me go back. If she was able to go back to her medical, I don't think she was able to go back to her medical job at that point. I think she had to do something different. Let me go back and look. I want to make sure I'm not mixing up things. Now, she did say she was optimistic about the future, because she was, you know, looking at going into the Sea Org, and she wanted to be in Sea Org like her parents and all of that. So, you know, so at least she had some optimism. Okay, so, and of course she had to go on the life orientation course. She's done the keto life and those things, all these courses that these children really should not be doing, but that they had to do. There was something else that struck me on page 139. So at some point, her mom, she was living with her mom. She was back at Flag at this point, but when we get back to page 139, she's back at Flag again with her mom. And, but her mom said, you know, if Uncle Dave's around, I don't want Uncle Dave to see you. It's okay. You know, let's go back. Annette says, I agree with you. I find it just causing me so much anger that she went through this so early. I have granddaughters her age, and I can't imagine them doing this and being on their own at that age. Same. And here's the thing. So my granddaughters live with a single mom. There are 6 children in her household, and there's one in my other. These are really my stepdaughters, but they're my daughters. And there's a boy in the other household. And I'm looking at my grandchildren thinking, I don't understand how these children are supposed to be able to do the things that they are expected to do. I don't understand what LRH was thinking. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. So again, on page 139, there was a point where she's back at Flag with her mom again. So there's a lot of back and forth that Jenna did at this time, during this point in her life. And she said, Mom directed me not to come around the office when he, meaning David Miscavige, was in town, and to eat lunch at the Lemon Tree. She told me to go home with Valeska after the course rather than look for her. So then she was at the office anyway, but she heard her uncle coming down the hall, And she said, I ran across the room to hide, but I was too late. Uncle Dave, Aunt Shelley, and Mom all saw me crouching behind the bookshelf when they opened the office door. Uncle Dave looked confused. Why are you hiding from us, Jenny? He asked. And of course, we know Jenny is what he called her. I stupidly explained it was because Mom had told me not to be in the office when he was there. Uncle Dave looked at my mom, who put on a baffled face. I never said that, she said. She had told me only a few days earlier, so I was confused as to why she would deny it now. Where were you doing something you shouldn't have been? Aunt Shelley wanted to know. And then Dave says, you don't have to run away from me. So I was really a little upset with Biddy at this point, because we know Biddy is her mom, that she lied, that she told her daughter, she told Jenna not to be around when Dave was around, and so when Jenna tried to hide, she covered herself. And then it struck me, in Scientology, you have to cover yourself. And unfortunately, these parents are brainwashed to put themselves first and to cover their own butts rather than defend their children and say, yeah, I told her that because, I was concerned that you might not want her around or something like that. She couldn't be honest. She couldn't be honest. I mean, you and I might look at it and say, well, I would be honest anyway, and I would defend my child or my grandchild and say, yeah, I said that. But we're not in their shoes, and I have a hard time putting myself in their shoes. I have a really hard time putting myself in their shoes. But I don't know. I don't understand not doing that. Annette says, it seems like a lot of parents do throw their kids under the bus to protect themselves. And I think that happens in outside of the bubble of Scientology as well. I think there are parents who do that, but it just seems like they all do it in Scientology for the most part. There are some that don't, and there's some that didn't. But as we know, as we were watching a lot of these ex-Scientologists, especially the second gens, and they talk about their parenting and how they were parented and being thrown under the bus. I mean, look at Reese, if you want to look at an example of that. Miriam, whose fathers were awful, both of them, and their fathers put themselves first before their own children. And I don't really understand that. And I think even to an extent, when you look at Mike Brown and his mother, who thankfully she's out and they have a beautiful relationship. I think she tried really hard to be a good mother, but she was so pulled by Scientology to not be one that, I just know that there were consequences if you didn't do things the way Scientology wanted you to do it. And especially more so, always, even with LRH, but also more so with David Miscavige in control. And that says, I cannot put myself in their shoes. My kids and grandkids are the most important thing to me. I protect them above all else. Same. I mean, I actually put a meme up today. Oh, hi, Sandy McKenna. Thanks for joining. Sandy says, I think it could be in part because children are thought of as adults in small bodies. I think you're right. And again, that's why I say Scientology has brainwashed these parents into thinking that, so that they don't treat them as their child. They literally try to get cut out and get rid of the parental instinct. And here's the thing. I always say I'm just a stepmom, but Keela McDonald last week said, hold up, you're a bonus mom. Okay, I'll take that. But I've never given birth to anyone. I have 2 grown stepdaughters that I helped raise from the ages of 7 and 10. They're like my own. Even when their father and I divorced and he subsequently passed of cancer about 2 years later, I still stayed close with both of them. The grandchildren who were born after we divorced call me Grammy. They come to my house. It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. But even as somebody who's never given birth to someone, I still cannot imagine not defending and protecting my child, or my stepchild in this case, or especially my grandchildren. Super protective of my grandchildren. I could bring my 14-year-old granddaughter out to vouch for that. But she's really tired from swimming in the springs today with my mom, her great-grandmother. So yeah, so that really struck me, that Biddy was so willing to right away, just as we say, throw Jenna under the bus. So I'm going to move on to page 148. And if you guys have any pages you want to, any quotes, any sections you want to review, please put it in the comments and we will talk about that as well. Annette says, I do understand that small bodies thing, but I have 4 grown kids and 6 grands who are adults, but that protection is still there for me. Don't mess with my family. Yes. I actually put something up on my Facebook today. Let me see if I can find it real quick, just so I can read it to you. So it means I have to look on my phone. Hold on one moment. Loading, please wait. Yes, I'm in the right account. Just have to go to my page. I have several accounts on my Facebook for business and for this channel. Here it is. Every family needs one unstable daughter that fears nothing and is willing to go to war with anyone who messes with her tribe. And that's me. So, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm very protective of my children and grandchildren. So Sandy says, I totally agree with Annette Babcock. I think that that's indicative of a lot of us. I think I'm a never-in, and I'm just super, I think we're all pretty much, pardon the language, but badass chicks, a lot of us. I think we really are. We're very protective. Most mothers, even us bonus moms who never gave birth, are very protective of our family. So again, if you have any passages, any pages, paragraphs you want to cover or sentence you want to cover, just try to indicate it in the comments for me, and we'll cover that as well. But I'm going to move to page 148 now. I'm not even sure what chapter I'm in. But oh, this really struck me too, because this is Jenna talking about her uncle David Miscavige, as kind of a family man, that he kind of was not the devil with horns that we kind of see now, not always. I'm just going to read this paragraph because I think the whole paragraph is significant. For all that he was head of the church and a powerful figure who inspired fear, moments like these showed a normal side to him. There were times when I could tell he just wanted to be a fun, normal uncle goofing around with his niece. And in these moments, it was almost impossible to see some sort of longing. It was almost possible to see some sort of longing for a family, a humanity that was hidden much of the time. From how he treated me, it seemed apparent that he didn't want me to be afraid of him in the way that most adults were. Sadly, these tender moments were going to become fewer and farther between. As the years went on, I saw that side of him less and less. And perhaps, given how he eventually seemed to change for the worse, it eventually ceased to exist entirely. But I have never forgotten Uncle Dave's gentle human side. And that really struck me because I'm so prone to just reacting to what we know about David Miscavige now, that I don't want to see him as human. I don't want to see him as a human the way you and I are. And that's not good. That's not good. In the words of Natalie's My Tony, be humble, be kind. Be humble and be kind. And, I have a tendency to not be kind about David Miscavige and some of the other people who are or were in leadership positions in the church who were abusive. Abuse is not to be excused, for sure, but I also need to learn a lesson about not forgetting there really is still a person at the core there deep down inside. They've just been corrupted horribly in some way. So it just struck me that there was more humanity there. I just never saw David Miscavige that way because my whole experience with David Miscavige has to do with YouTube and ex-Scientologists who talk about how they were treated and how abusive David is and was. I think it might be a little less now, but I'm not sure. Sandy says, it's hard to see him as a kind person based on the stories we've heard. Exactly. It really is. It's tough to see him that way because that's not how we know him. We only know him through the experience of the people whose words we read or listen to. So it's a lesson to me to just try to remember we are still all human, even those of us who are, we're all flawed. We all have our flaws. Some of us maybe have different flaws. Annette says, yeah, money and power corrupted David for sure, and it is hard to be forgiving because of what we know he has done and is doing. Yeah, I agree with that totally. And I know there's a part of me that's like, as much as we would like for Scientology and the leadership to change their policies and how they do things, number one, LRH has set certain things down, and you have to do it that way because it's, scripture. But the other thing is they are all so invested now into how they do things and what they do. I don't think David Miscavige, I don't think would ever be able to say, even if he has a complete epiphany and inside knows he's wrong, he's done everything wrong, this is not the way a human is supposed to act, all of those things, even if he literally had a come to Jesus moment, I don't know how much he would be able to say out loud, I was wrong, we're going to stop, I'm not doing this anymore. I think he's just too far invested. His whole life has been invested in this. And I just don't know how you can change that. Like Reese's father, those of us who, I don't know if you two know about, I'm sure you know enough about Reese if you're on her page. I don't know if you are or you aren't. But, Reese's father was terribly, terribly abusive, and he's still a real jerk. And I just don't know if would ever be capable of, do you want to come say hi? No? My granddaughter does not want to come say hi. She's walking by to her room. But Reese's father, I don't know that he'd ever be able to just say, I'm sorry, Reese. I'm sorry I treated you the way I did, because I just don't know that they have it in them to do that. They're so far invested in this now that they would completely lose face if they backpedaled at all. And that says, I agree with you on that. And so it's sad, but I think that's the way it is. All right, let me move on. Again, if you guys have some sections you want to go over or read, let me know. Just throw it in there. Just say like page 150, second paragraph, something like that. And you can give me a gist if you want of what you want to say. All right, I'm going to move on to page, where am I? Yes, page 156. This is the beginning of chapter 14. And this is where Jenna is talking about going into CMO training. That's the Commodore Messenger's Office training. And it just struck me. So, we talk about on the SPTV channels, they talk about all the time that Scientology is supposed to be able to teach you to communicate. You'll become the best communicator in the world. It's the best, that they have the key to how to communicate the best. And yet there's almost no communication here in this whole first page. So of chapter 14, this is page 156. Things were odd this is when she's coming back to Clearwater again. I don't know which time. I lose count of how many times she went back and forth. Things were odd from the moment I landed in Clearwater that June afternoon in 1996. Tom, who was supposed to meet me at the airport, was nowhere to be seen. I had no money, no phone number for him or anyone else, and I was starting to get really worried. So here she is at Tampa Airport by herself. Nothing's been communicated. She has no money. She has nothing. He finally gets there, says he thought that it was an hour later and all of that, right? So there's number one, no communication. Not just poor communication, but no communication. And then further down the page, he's bringing her, into Flag, into the area there in Clearwater, and he goes past where her mom's apartment is. And she says, I don't get to live over in L Block? I asked, confused. He laughed and said, no, that's for senior execs from INT. Oh, I said, suddenly wondering what I had actually signed up for. The whole time I'd imagined living at Flag. It had never occurred to me that I wouldn't be living in Mom's old apartment, and it had never occurred to me that I was going to be in a dorm. Again, no communication. Why are these things not communicated? If they're supposed to be these great communicators, why can they not even communicate to a young girl when you get to the airport, this is who's meeting you here. If he's late, blah, 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 whatever. Why does she not have any money? Why does she not have a phone number to call someone if she's stranded at the airport? And then why didn't anybody say, yes, you're going back to Clearwater, but you need to understand you're not going to be living with your mom. You're going to be in a dorm. Like, why throw this as a surprise on people? I don't understand the whole concept in Scientology of never telling anybody anything, even though they're supposed to be these great communicators. Why you insist on not telling anybody anything and creating all this chaos and a panic and anxiety in people? You're trying to teach them to not have those kinds of emotions, but you're constantly putting them in a state of what I would call the freeze, flight, or fright mode. I don't understand. I don't understand this at all. So it just struck me again as they talk about being these great communicators and teaching people to communicate, and yet they don't really communicate anything with their own people. So if you have thoughts about that, happy to hear them. If you have any other section in that area you want to talk about, we can do that too. So, and there is a little bit of a lag, guys, just so you know, because I'm on StreamYard. So if you're on StreamYard, there's a lag when you comment. I see things a little bit later over here on StreamYard. So like maybe 5 to 10 seconds, something like that. It's not terrible, but it's there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to, where are we going? Oh, page 180. I skipped quite ahead because I was literally through this whole part of the book. The first part of the book, I had a few bookmarks and had a few things I wanted to discuss. And we did go through some questions if you watch the replay, just to kind of get us going. With this section, I was practically bookmarking every page. And I thought, I can't do this for 10, 11 chapters. We're going to end up, is it 10 or 11? I don't remember, but we're going to end up being here all night if I do that. So I had to like back myself off a little bit. Sandy says, that's a really good point about yet another glaring example of lack of communication. Yeah, I mean, she's a child, and no matter that she's an adult in a small body, whatever, even if she was an adult, why would you not give them a phone number? Hey, if you get to the airport and your ride's not there, here's the phone number to call to find out what's going on. I'm a person who's done management, lots of management in life, and I don't have lots of and I did not have lots of employees, but I managed lots of projects, lots of events, things like that. And there's always a backup. You always have a phone number as a backup if you need to, if there's something that's going wrong, or something isn't going the way it is, or somebody's not where they were supposed to be. There's always a plan. There's always a communication, something. You plan ahead for things. You plan ahead. I don't understand the concept of not doing that. So, all right. So I'm going to move to page 180. This is the TR training stuff. And I can't remember what TR's in the training routines. That's what it is. This is the TR's stuff. And I'm sitting here reading this paragraph, and I was getting angrier and angrier. And then I'm going to tell you the word I wrote in the margin of my book. So I'm on page 180, down near the bottom. I had to be able to sit comfortably in a chair in front of another student for 2 straight hours without speaking, moving, twitching, coughing, or blinking excessively. Many people, including me, stayed on this training routine for weeks. At one point, I had been motionless for 90 minutes when a fly landed on my nose. I blew it away with my lips, which caused me to flunk, and I had to start over again. It was excruciating, several times bringing me to tears. I found it almost impossible not to move. My legs felt like they were going to walk away on their own, and it took everything I had to stay still. And that's before you even get to bull baiting. That, to me, I wrote in my margin over here, torture. That is physical torture. It's physical torture for anyone, any person. But for a child, most children have energy they need to get out. And making them sit there for 2 hours straight and not move, and if a fly lands on their nose, they can't respond to it to move the fly off their. I don't, and now they have to start over again. Unbelievably torturous, in my opinion. To me, right there, that's the kind of thing. And now, granted, it's just a fly landing on her nose, but having a child sit for 2 hours without moving, without getting up at all, that's torture, in my opinion. And I know some people have a feeling that, public school does a little bit of that. I'm not going to get into that debate. My parents are both retired educators. My dad has passed, and they were public school educators. I have nothing against public school, but I do know that school today isn't the school that I was in. And it says clear torture / child abuse. Exactly. I know when I was in school many moons ago, they had us get up every once in a while. You only had, maybe 30 minutes on a certain topic, maybe 45 if it was really intense topic. But in between, you got up, you moved, you changed, you did something different. Oh, get up and go get your history book for this, or it's time to do math, so get your paper out. You can move around and do things, but to sit completely still for 2 hours, I don't think I could do that as an adult. And I just can't imagine doing that to a child. And then on the next page, literally on the next page over, they're talking about the bull baiting part. Jenna's talking about the bull baiting. Starting at the bottom of 180, we had to endure 2 hours of being yelled at, made fun of, and even sexually taunted. And I know the second gens that are out have talked about this. I know, like, literally Serge talks about this all the time, that this is inappropriate. And I wrote that, inappropriate, with exclamations, and I underlined it. I just got so angry at that. And at the risk, I don't want to do TMI here, but I have a sexual abuse history from childhood, not from a family member. Thank goodness. This was outside of the family friend kind of thing. But my parents, had they known about it, would not have sanctioned it. My church, had they known about it, would not have sanctioned it. They would have been appalled. It would have been a huge thing. I just can't imagine. I mean, the adults that are there say it's okay to do that. It's okay to talk sexually with a child. I don't get it. I mean, it's different if you're telling the child about the birds and the bees at an age appropriate level, but to do this bull baiting stuff and sexually taunt, especially a girl, especially a teenager, girl or boy, that are just starting to maybe go through puberty, and you're going to sexually taunt them. I can't imagine my grandchildren going through that. Annette says, my stepsister did crap like that to her stepkids and fortunately lost custody. State removed them from the home. So why can this church do it? Child abuse is child abuse. Yes. I'm so sorry that your stepsister did that to her stepkids. I'm glad it was taken care of. But those children are going to be, not to coin a phrase, they're going to be scarred for life. Hopefully they dealt with it and got some therapy and are able to deal with it now. But And Sandy says, talking about the sexual part, it's disgusting. It is. It's completely disgusting. And again, as somebody who is a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, I want to hit those people. I am so angry about that. Like I said, I alternated between sad and angry through this whole section of the book. So again, don't forget, if you have something you want to discuss, topic within the book, anything to do with the book, doesn't even have to be a certain page number, whatever. If you just have something you want to say, try not to spoil the rest of the book for me if you've read it all, because I stopped at 21. All right, so I'm going to go to page 183, and I just started this. I don't know what this is here, so let me just read it and we'll see. Oh, this. So they were talking about the courses are supposed to be about training auditors to be smooth with their communication and less distracting to pre-clears in session. But the result was that it made all of us more robotic. That struck me. Robotic. The people we were auditing, not as people with feelings, but as reactive minds that needed to be bent to the will of the auditing session for their own good. The dialogue was designed to dehumanize. And right there, that to me is the whole underpinning of this is a cult. We know it's a cult. We know that Scientology checks off most, if not all, of the check boxes for a cult. But to teach these people to do auditing, whether they're children or adults, and to do it in a robotic way, and it's designed, and to teach them to do this auditing, which is designed to dehumanize people. I don't know how you can say it's anything but a cult. I don't know how Scientology gets away with the things they get away with, and why people don't, see once they're in it. I understand it is a prison of belief, but there's got to be a piece of them at some point that says, wait a minute, something is wrong here. And maybe a lot of them do have those feelings, but because they can't talk about it amongst themselves, and because if you do talk about it amongst yourselves, then you're in major trouble. And because you can't just, especially if you're Sea Org or Cadet Org or any of those, you can't just get up and leave. They will physically restrain you from leaving. I don't know. It just, even if they know deep down that something is wrong, I think they just have so much on top of them that they can't express it. And Jenna tries to in this section, and I think I've marked some of it where she tries to say, wait a minute, something's not right here, and yet she gets in trouble. She was even trying to say at some points that things were not being applied the way they're supposed to be applied according to policy, and yet she was getting in trouble instead of the people who weren't applying it properly. That just floored me. That floored me. All right, so I'm going to read this now on page. Any thoughts on the dehumanizing part? Again, and that's where the whole, and so there's like this whole juxtaposition. I'm going to sexually taunt you, 12-year-old girl or whatever, but I'm also going to teach you to dehumanize people. I don't know. Jenna was always a thinker, Sandy says. Absolutely. Absolutely. She's smart. Jenna's a smart lady, and she started off a smart girl. So, okay, I'm going to go to page 185 real quick. So this is what I was just talking about. She writes a letter to Jenna Miscavige, her Aunt Shelley. And she says, concerned, I wrote a letter to Aunt Shelley. In the letter, I told her I hadn't done the EPF. Hang on. And it has something to say. I want to make sure I get that. Yes, the upper power does not want you questioning anything at all, especially authority. Yes, again, cult checkbox right there. So something isn't being done right. So, She was saying, so this is when Jenna was in the Sea Org boot camp. No, sorry, take it back. She's already in the CMO training and stuff, but she never was as a Sea Org member, but she never went through the boot camp, the EPF. She never went through any of that. So she felt like, I haven't done these things that I need to do that I should have done. I should have done the estate projects force training for Sea Org before I became a Sea Org member, but I didn't. And she's telling her Aunt Shelley this. I wrote a letter to Aunt Shelley. In the letter, I told her I hadn't done the EPF and thought I should have. A week or so later, I was called to the office of Mr. Sue Gentry, and that annoys the crap out of me, too, that they have to be Mr. even though they're female. That's just stupid, in my opinion. The head RTC rep at Flag. When I arrived, she handed me a letter Aunt Shelley had written me. In it, she scolded me about not wanting to do the boot camp, saying that everyone had to do EPF, even senior executives, and I was no exception. Clearly, she had misread my letter to her and thought I was trying to get out of my obligation rather than trying to fulfill it. And I just wrote WTH for what the hell. Did Shelley, I don't know if Shelley intentionally misread it or if she just misread it because she's so busy at the time that she didn't read through the whole letter. I mean, or maybe Jenna didn't make herself clear, but I kind of doubt that because we just said Jenna's a thinker and she was even back then a smart cookie. So I don't understand why that got misread so badly so that she ends up getting in trouble instead of saying, oh, you know what? You're right. You do need to go to this boot camp. We're going to send you there. I don't understand. I don't understand this part at all. And, you know, Serge makes a good point. If you've ever watched any of his stuff, we have all tended to feel fairly bad for Shelley. We think she's been squirreled away against her will. You know, where's Shelley Miscavige? Nobody's seen her in public, blah, 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 all of that. And I was one of those people that I felt bad for her and thought, you know, she's being held against her will. She's, you know, basically a prisoner. And yet literally Serge is letting us know that Shelley was one of the primary traffickers. And Jenna's book makes that clear. I mean, Shelley and Jenna kind of have an interesting relationship, but Shelley was just as involved in bringing children to different places around the world with Scientology as other people were. So I don't have as much compassion for Shelley as I used to. I still have some, but not as much as I did before. And because Serge really kind of clued me into that. And I thought, well, maybe Serge is a little dramatic sometimes, can we say? So maybe he's just being a little dramatic, but Jenna kind of confirms that in this book. So, and that says, this is where I started to have a different opinion of Shelley. Previously, I only had heard about her through Leah, exactly, and where is Shelley? So I felt she was a victim. Now through this book, I realize she is bad. I think she's just as bad as David. I think you may be right. I think you may be right. And so, like I said, I don't have nearly as much compassion for her as I had before. I just don't. So what time is it? 9:07. I'm trying to end this like at an hour. I don't want to keep any of us too long. But if we're having a good discussion, I don't want to end either. So Sandy says, the only good thing about Shelley is the eyes it has brought to Scientology from the outside world. Good point. Good point. I think you are right. I think you are right. And that might be, I mean, I know some of us have issues with Leah lately, and I totally understand that. We're not going to debate that on this channel. But just saying that, you know, I kind of wonder if that wasn't Leah's intention all along, was just to bring eyes on it. And that's like, you are right, Sandy. Yep, I agree. All right, so I'm going to move to page 186, and let's see. Oh, I'm going to tell you what I wrote in my margin after I read this real quick. So I'm about halfway down the page. And she's talking about auditing sessions and security check sessions. While this questioning itself was stressful, the real impact was something much more deeply psychological and unsettling. The repeated nature of the questions made you doubt yourself in ways that were hard to describe, especially when the e-meter indicated that you did have an answer to the question. And it goes on to just talk about how, you know, you got to have the floating needle and all of that. But I wrote gaslighting. This is institutionalized gaslighting using the e-meter that they use. So again, the repeated nature of the questions made you doubt yourself in ways that are hard to describe, especially when the e-meter indicated that you did have an answer to the question. So you may not have an answer to the question, but the e-meter says you do. So they just keep at you until you make something up. And to me, this is a form of gaslighting, of making a person doubt themselves and doubt their own memory or doubt their own thoughts about things. That just really struck me, that it's institutionalized gaslighting. That's all it is. So if you have thoughts on that, I would love to hear it as well. You know, these were confessions for things that you knew for a fact had never happened. So that you end up confessing things that you knew hadn't happened. You didn't do these things, but you confess them anyway because the e-meter says there's something there. It's complete gaslighting. And it's institutional and sanctioned by the institution known as Scientology. I don't have any more words for that. Again, sadness and anger through this whole section of the book. I also, interestingly, I kind of called the first section in my own head the like setup and indoctrination. And this section to me, I'm calling everything falls apart, because as we know, things kind of fall apart in Jenna's life. But this is all of it sort of kind of starting to unravel a little bit. Annette says, I don't really understand how the e-meter works. Does it really do anything at all? Or is it a sham and the auditor's saying whatever they want? It's kind of a combination of both. And I'm not an expert at all, but from what I understand, listening to some of the former Scientologists on their channels, there is an electric current that goes through here. Now, understand, L. Ron Hubbard did not invent the e-meter. It was invented by somebody else. He just took it over and sort of made it his own. But when you're holding those cans, there is an electric current that goes through a small electrical current, because we're electricity to a certain extent, that goes through the cans into the needle. And it can indicate that there's a change in the electric current, but whether it's actually showing truth or not truth is debatable, highly debatable. Listen, even lie detector tests that are done by law enforcement, which are based on the same thing, electrical current. You put these different leads on you, finger around this, the rib cage, things like that. And it's testing some different things. But one of the things is electric. It's motion of your body. From what I understand, motion of your body to a certain extent, the amount of moisture on your skin, but also a little bit of an electric current. That's why you see the needle on the lie detector thing going. There's an electric current going through there. But even lie detector tests are not necessarily admissible in court. You can't say, oh, he's definitely telling the truth. You can say deception is indicated, but it's not a given. So is the e-meter a real thing? Yes. Does it actually do something to a certain extent? Yes. But yes, it is not subjective at all. There's just the objective. I mean, it's not objective at all. It's definitely subjective to the auditor actually providing it. So Sandy says, it's almost like a police interrogation when they're trying to railroad someone. Exactly. And that's, the cops can lie to you. You can't lie to the cops. And I'm a law enforcement supporter most of the time, not the LAPD for obvious reasons. But I have friends and really good friends in police force. There's actually one of the main guys at the sheriff's department in the next county over where I used to live and still work is a really good friend of mine. So I love law enforcement, but yes, law enforcement can lie to you. Just like when law enforcement can say, when there's two people involved and they've got you in separate rooms, well, hey, Sandy, I'm just telling you, Annette's in the other room and she's already, saying that you did everything. Annette hasn't said that at all, but they can tell Sandy that, right? And then maybe Sandy will roll on Annette. So, I mean, but yes, it's a similar kind of thing. That's a form of gaslighting. Absolutely. All right, so let's move on, because I have so many more bookmarks and we don't have a huge amount of time if we want to try to keep this. Oh, same. I'm on page 188 now, near the top. So she says, this is just a little line that Jenna wrote in here. There were about 20 people on the EPF, that's the Estates Project Force, with me, and nobody was over the age of 18. One small boy was only 9. He had come with his mother to Flag to take services. But not all of the kids on the EPF had parents there. That's child trafficking. But also, if they're all under the age of 18, that is child slave labor. It just is. You can't change my mind on that. And I don't think either of you would do that. But it's child slave labor. A 9-year-old boy that's supposedly in the CMO training and on the EPF for that, the Estates Project Force, at age 9. And she says in the same paragraph, he was wound up being recruited into the Sea Org, much like everybody else on the EPF. There was always a huge recruitment drive, and there was at least one person recruited each week. So again, child slave labor. So I want to make sure there weren't any other comments. And then same page down near the bottom, this is when Jenna is filling out some paperwork. She had to fill out a life history form. This is the life history form for Scientology. Asks things like, normal things: name, birthplace, social security number. Okay, I have to give that on job applications and things like that, right? Other ID numbers, credit cards, and bank accounts, as well as their numbers and expiration dates. I've never worked for a company or been labor force for a company that wanted to know my bank account and credit card numbers and when they expired. Now, they might need my routing number to do a direct deposit of my paycheck, but they don't need anything else to know about my bank account or my financial business. And she was basically saying, if she had to say whether she'd been in crime or been in jail. Now, these are kids who've been raised in Scientology, so how would they have had any of these things? But she said also on the next page on 189, I knew I had to do it, but it was hard to understand why the church needed this information. Yes, it is. The theory of confessionals made sense to me, but this was not standard confessional procedure. And what did my relatives' names have to do with my eligibility? I was too young to have a credit card, but why would they need that info? Even though I had nothing to hide, I felt like the church was asking me for information just for the sake of having it, almost asking for material they might blackmail me with and that served no Scientologic purpose. And then she said, I felt like I was handing over a piece of myself. I did it anyway, of course, rationalizing that if I had nothing to hide, I shouldn't have a problem with it. Now, why does Scientology need that kind of information? Again, they're using it against these people. They're using it, number one, look at Rosemary Brown, Mike Brown's mother, right? As she became older and ended up very sick and ended up in their little retirement home thing that they sent her to, they were still using her credit card, getting credit cards in her name. They were using her Social Security check that she was getting, which wasn't much, I'm sure, because they didn't get paid much, so it wasn't much put into Social Security. And yet they were using all of her ID information to get money to send other people to courses. It wasn't even for her. It was for other people. That's identity theft. And why those people aren't being prosecuted for that, I don't understand. Scientology should be prosecuted for a lot of things, but one of them is identity theft. They take these people's information and then they use it to open credit cards and things in their name to pay for other people's services. How is that not identity theft? I mean, your mileage may vary on that, but they literally take this information so they can use it down the road for their own purposes, and in many cases use things that you've written down in your life history to blackmail you later, just like Jenna said. Checkbox on the cult list, right? Getting information that they can use against you at some point. And it says, I agree with you on the ID theft. How is that not prosecuted? I don't know. And I know that if you know the story about Mike Brown and his mother, Rosemary Brown, they ended up getting I think all the money that they could prove was taken from her in some way back. Several thousand, I want to say it was 5 figures they got. I don't remember exactly. But they did end up getting it back, but that was in a civil lawsuit. Why was there just a civil lawsuit? Why weren't the people involved prosecuted? Maybe the church can't be prosecuted, but the specific people who authorized it and said, do it, they should be prosecuted. And they're Scientologists. So there's so many things that Scientology does that I don't understand how they're not being prosecuted. You can't hide behind religious exemption for all of it or religious practice for all of it. It's when religious practice, my understanding of the law, and I'm limited because I'm not an attorney, I'm not any of those things, but my understanding of the law is that you do have your right to practice your religion as you see fit, unless or until it crosses legal boundaries. And when it has crossed legal boundaries, such as child abuse, child sexual exploitation, financial exploitation of elderly people, abuse and neglect of elderly people, these things should be prosecuted. Just because it's part of the church's practice and their policy doesn't mean it hasn't crossed a legal line. And I don't understand why nobody has the balls, excuse my French, to take Scientology on from a prosecutor's standpoint and prosecute these people. Maybe we all just need to make more noise about it. My problem is I live in Florida. I live too far from anything. I'm north of Tampa, St. Pete area, so I'm not in that, which is Clearwater. I'm a good 2 hours away. The closest thing to me is a mission in Ocala that's funded by John Travolta, because we know missions are funded by private Scientologists. And there's nothing going on in that mission. There's no reason for me to go there or protest there or anything like. There's nothing they're doing there that's illegal that I can think of. But why are prosecutors afraid to do this? Sandy McKenna says, I've got to believe the feds are gathering intel. I hope so. I know that Mike Render said we gave all this information to them and the IRS and to the FBI. Well, that's all well and good. But as we know, unless you understand what these documents mean, you can't just look at the documents on the thumb drive unless you know about Scientology. Now, if there are Scientology experts at FBI who understand what they're reading and understand the lingo and what it means and when it's applied, what that means, what actually is to practice, maybe. But, just saying, here, FBI, here's all the files, and talk to them a little bit, and now you're going away. Somebody needs to be pushing that button all the time. Somebody who knows, somebody who's involved needs to be pushing that button all the time with the FBI and say, where are we? Where are things? What are you doing? There's something you don't understand. What do I need to explain to you from these documents? Annette says, the Catholic Church is a perfect example with the child SA abuse. So why does Scientology get away with it? Hello? Exactly. The Catholic Church was exposed. People were prosecuted. People went to prison. Some were also moved around, and the people who moved them around got into trouble for that. Scientology tends to do that too, move people around, right? I mean, Aaron talks about that. I can't remember the guy's name, but he talks about how this guy's just been moved around from place to place, and yet he's just as guilty of doing this. Annette says, if I understand it correctly, they have had Mike Render's documents for years. I don't believe anything is being done. And that's my concern too. That's what I'm saying. A thumb drive of documents was handed over, a flash drive, whatever you want to call it. But again, unless somebody's sitting there every day with these people and explaining and making them experts on Scientology, how do they know what to do with it? Because those documents, you take the documents at just the face value. If you don't know what the acronyms mean, all the initials and stuff, if you don't know what it means when the policy is applied, what does it actually mean, then how do you know what to prosecute or what to move forward on? I just feel like there's nobody actually really doing that. And it has to come from somebody who was in Scientology. I don't think it can be a never-end. I think it has to be somebody who was in Scientology. And I think that's why a lot of civil lawsuits are moving forward, because nothing's being done from a criminal perspective. So if things aren't going to be done from a criminal perspective, then let's push it on the civil side. I think that's kind of where we are. Now, interestingly, the Danny Masterson case, it started with civil litigation that ended up becoming criminal. And they put civil on hold to do the whole criminal case. Now the civil suits are back in play, but the civil suits came first. So sometimes civil suits can spur criminal action at some future point. So maybe some of these suits, that's what it may happen. Maybe, let's hope. Let's see. Sandy says, I would hope they have found such a resource. I would hope so too. I just can't trust that the people who we thought were doing that are actually doing it. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to use any names, because I don't want to get anybody coming in and striking my channel for slander, et cetera, et cetera. So, I will read yours. That is why I'm angry at a certain person now, because it was his documents he needs to be pushing. And I wonder if he isn't, because he's worried about implicating himself. That's what some people are saying, that he's worried he's going to implicate himself. So, I mean, I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. I hope we all live to see it play out, because it's taken years so far for anything to be done. Now, I will say, with the recent protests happening all around the world and really getting it out there on this kind of media, on YouTube and TikTok and places like that, Instagram, Twitter, I think that's making a difference. I mean, look at William Good. William Good has his Follow the Police or whatever it is channel, but he started doing Streets LA, where he's auditing LAPD and in relation to Scientology. That's a relatively new channel for him, and it's already at 250,000 subscribers. That's huge that it grew that quickly. And I think that's indicative that people are taking notice. Unfortunately, the lamestream media, what I call the lamestream media, the legacy media, your regular news channels and newspapers, if they even exist anymore, et cetera, even their own websites for these entities, I don't think they do as well, to me, as far as reaching the actual public, as things like social media, Facebook included. I think that that's where it's going to have to be coming from. And I think all of this that we're doing, that all of us are trying to do with SPTV, I think that at some point it's going to have to push law enforcement somewhere to act. Hoping sooner rather than later. But All right, we're getting close to 9:30. I'm trying not to go over an hour, but I think we're going to end up going over an hour a little bit. I apologize in advance. Page 191. I don't know why I marked this, but I'm going to read it. Oh, this is talking about Charlie. This was the 9-year-old boy that was working with them. His name was Charlie. Hang on a second. And that says, did you see that he won his anti-SLAPP? Yes. Lawsuit involving La Poubelle. Yes. He thinks it is going to be a precedent. Yes, I think so too. And that's, again, where I think it's going to have to come from things like that eventually it works itself into criminal prosecution of people at some point. But yes, I saw that. I actually saw Aaron's live with William today. So yay, he's a good man. Like my pun. Okay, so this is Jenna talking about this 9-year-old kid, Charlie. I didn't... she says, lost as he may have been, it was easy to get annoyed with him for his unusual behavior. After all, Louisa and I were punished because of it. However, for me, he was as much a curiosity as a source of annoyance. Here's the meat of it. I didn't realize it then, but he was the first child I'd encountered who actually acted like a child. At the ranch, we didn't have kids like him. Kids at the ranch were too busy being little adults. In Charlie, I was witnessing how a kid was supposed to behave at this age. He seemed totally foreign, as though his brain was wired in a way that I'd never encountered, with an absence of logic and unique ignorance of instructions. Never before had I met a child this impulsive, and only now can I see that I, not he, was the strange one for expecting him to follow orders. That just struck me so hard there that, you know, to her, this child who was acting like a child was unusual because of how she was raised in Scientology. Again, that's where my sadness jumps in. So, I mean, it's just sad what these children went through. And as much as they like to say, well, there's no such thing as a cadet org anymore and things like that, there are still children within Scientology that are not being treated well. And that says, that made me so sad for Jenna. And Sandy says, that's so sad. Yep, it is sad. It's terribly sad. All right, so I'm going to move on to 201, page 201. This is where Biddy, Jenna's mom, has been in the RPF, the, what do they call it? Rehabilitation Projects Force, or basically labor camp. So, and re-indoctrination camp. She's there and she's wanting to leave. She's wanting to leave Scientology. So Jenna goes to her at Int Base to try to talk her into staying. And I just wrote Biddy Part 2 because I was, you know, very angry about the whole Biddy thing before when she kind of threw Jenna under the bus. So I'm not going to read this whole page, but this page just basically was like, this showed me more of the human side. We hugged each other for a long time. She wasn't saying anything, so I started the conversation. And when she first got there, back on page 200, you know, Biddy stood up and started crying as Jenna came in the room. And Jenna realized how much she missed her. And she said, all at once, I felt awful, as though I should have made more of an effort to find out what was happening with her. And then she talks her mom into staying. And of course, and they're at that point, they decide they are allowed to end up writing back and forth, which is a win to a certain extent. Oh, definitely a win. But it just, I was like, okay, so I think it was big of Jenna to want to go there and help her mom, even if it was misguided in helping mom stay inside Scientology. But, you know, Jenna didn't want to lose her family. That was the biggest thing. She didn't want to lose her family members. So this is now going into chapter 18. The questions begin. And this is where I think some seeds are planted. And that's what I want to go to. Page 211. This is talking about her friend Martino, the guy that she ends up having a crush on for a while. They really have a thing for each other and they get in trouble eventually. But I put up in my margin, Martino planting seeds. And it just, the whole thing, let me see if I can find, I didn't actually underline anything here. Okay, so compelled as I was by the mystery of the levels themselves, the concept of physical harm also perplexed me. Talking all this over with Martino, I kept coming back to this simple question. How can information hurt you physically? This is like the stuff saying if you learn about this stuff too soon, it'll make you sick. You'll get pneumonia, you'll die, that kind of stuff. It made sense that information could upset you emotionally, but physical harm was a different story. I tried to imagine what the harm would be. Something about the whole idea seemed wrong, but the threat of pain and even death inspired fear nonetheless. My discussions with Martino always possessed an openness that I hadn't encountered before. They weren't regimented or scripted. They just sort of unfolded depending on how comfortable we were and what we felt like sharing. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but to me, Martino is the person that really started planting seeds. I think the stuff that happened with her mom being on the RPF was probably part of it, and everything that happened to her maybe, because as we know, she was a thinker and she questioned things a lot in the beginning anyway. But I think Martino planted some seeds in her, and I'm glad that he did. I'm sorry things didn't work out for them. But I just saw that it's like where the seeds really started to be planted and watered with her questioning what was going on here with Scientology and her involvement in it. Of course, if you have the printed book, I don't know if Kindle has it or not, but there's these really cool photos of Jenna as a baby and a little girl and growing up, which I just thought were, and then a picture of her with her now ex-husband and their 2 kids. It was really cute pictures. Okay, so now I'm going to page 221. Any comments, please make them. I don't want to skip over. I'm trying to keep up with them. It's just 2 of you, so it's not that hard. Oh, I got so struck by this paragraph on page 221. And we're talking about OSA, the Office of Special Affairs. Office of Special Affairs, OSA, which handled external public relations for church matters, said they were on top of the protesters in the situation. And they're talking about the protesters at the time of the whole Lisa McPherson thing, when Lisa McPherson died at the hands of not being treated properly by Scientology, etc., and Dr. David Minkoff, who Aaron likes to talk about. So these are protests around all of that. So they say that they're on top of the protesters in the situation. In reality, they, meaning OSA, were trying to get the protesters removed by having OSA members bait the protesters into acting out, at which point the OSA person would act as though they had been pushed or hit, when in reality they had not. They would then call the police and try to get the protest called off or have the protester arrested. Does any of this sound familiar? OSA also put up mugshots of all the protesters all over their neighborhoods, alleging that the protesters were sexual perverts and deadbeat dads. They did the same inside our buildings as well, posting the protesters' photographs and lists of their alleged crimes in case anyone started wondering about them. So this book was published in what year? Let me go back. Let me look. Let me just make sure I get the year right. 2013, 11 years ago. That paragraph just described exactly what's happening with the protesters now. Seems like, Sandy says, seems like not much has changed in the last few decades. Exactly. This is an exact description of what is happening with the protesters now all over the world, but especially in LA. I want to see what I wrote here. Okay, I said, why can't this be used to prove to law enforcement that that's what they're doing? So when law enforcement does get called to protesters, I would pull this book out if it were me. I'd say, look, this is a book written by the niece of the man who's in charge of this church. And this is what she said was happening in 2013. It's the same thing. And this is from the inside. I don't know why this can't be used to show law enforcement, hey, this is what they're doing. So yeah, not much has changed, but it really struck me as like, oh my gosh, she just described exactly what's happening now with the protesters. All right, I think I just have a couple of bookmarks left. I know you guys are going, yay. Hang on. What is this about? Let me look real quick. Oh, this is when Jenna's in real trouble, and her Aunt Shelley has basically said, I don't know if I'm going to talk to you again. I hope so. She's in a lot of trouble here. So here's where the last paragraph says, I couldn't believe how I had come to this, how unethical I had been. Now, of course, she wasn't, but this is her Scientology brain thinking. I had risked losing everything. This was after Jenna was really, she was trying to leave. She spit on somebody, all of that stuff. Hang on, let's see. And it has a comment about our last section. The biggest change is that even though sometimes arrests happen, the courts are throwing it out. Yes, nothing in recent things have followed have resulted in charges sticking. Exactly. I don't think anybody's charges have stuck so far. It just to me though, it's textbook. It's Jenna's giving them the textbook. So, and it also says the videos of all the streamers helps there. Indeed. And that's something they did not have in 2013. Streaming was not a thing. Yes, you could record things on your phone and show it later, but live streaming was not a thing. At least I don't think it was in 2013. If it was, it wasn't being used in a widespread way. So anyway, we're back to Jenna's in a lot of trouble. She tried to actually leave. She hit people. She spit on people. And I don't blame her. I do the same thing. But now she's thinking of herself as being unethical. I risked losing everything I had worked for and dreamed about my whole life for some guy I just met a few months ago, meaning Martino. I knew that I had to make up for this, that I had a long road ahead of me, but I vowed to myself I would. As I was finishing my thought, Anne Rathbun, and this is Marty Rathbun's wife, returned to the room, closed the door, glared at me, and told me to pick up the cans. And all I did was I drew 2 arrows pointing at that last paragraph and said, I want to hurt people. And what I mean by that is Jenna's hurting here. She's clearly going through something. Initially she felt like she had been wronged, and that's why she reacted the way she did. And yet now she's having to pick up the cans and she's being glared at by this woman. You know, I know Marty Rathbun is like Dave's right-hand devil man, even though he's technically not in anymore. He kind of sort of is. I didn't realize his wife, Anne, was just as involved in this way. It always surprises me that when people on SPTV talk about certain people like Marty or other people, but they don't talk about their spouse and what their spouse also did. That the spouse did things too. And like with Shelley, Miscavige, we hear about Dave, but Shelley was just as bad in many ways. So I just want to hurt people because of the way they treated Jenna and really all the children. All of it just really bothers me. Okay, and now I'm going to go and I'm going to watch in case you'll have comments. I'm going to page 236. And so here Jenna's talking about the kids that have been at the Int base. A lot of them that have been at the Int base with her at the ranch were now in Clearwater. She suddenly saw them all coming in. I was speechless. It was hard to believe that the ranch was empty of kids. The kids needed to learn Scientology and learn a real job. Shocked as I was, I could barely contain my excitement that they were in Clearwater, but I could see the fear on their faces. They had all just been sent 3,000 miles away from their parents who were at INT. And we know that INT is the international base, right? Out in California. So the parents were at INT. The children have been sent 3,000 miles away. At least they came together. When I made the trip 3 years earlier, I was all of 12 and all alone. I hugged them again and told them it was going to be okay, that they would like it here. Child trafficking. These children have been sent 3,000 miles away from their parents to be slave labor at Flag while they're in training. Again, child trafficking. And I know this is just Jenna's word, and it's just Jenna's, thoughts about all this and her memories of it. So it's not necessarily a legally admissible thing, but I don't know why it can't be used to show people in law enforcement who should be looking at prosecuting, hey, there's some smoke here in this book. Maybe you guys should go look for the fire. So I just don't understand it. That to me is prime example of child trafficking. These children are being sent across the country. Their parents are still in California. Here they are in Clearwater, Florida. I don't even know what to say other than that. It's child trafficking. Let's see. This is towards the end of the last chapter in this section. It may not be towards the end, but it's in the last chapter of this section. This is where Jenna starts to kind of flip over to saying, I don't want to be in this anymore. She's not really saying that yet. She was saying, that she thought the problem was with her. As a result, I doubted myself constantly. I doubted whether I was a good person. I doubted whether the people around me were good people, etc. All because Scientology made me feel that I was a problem. Now, for the first time, I was able to see myself for what I was. Someone who made mistakes and was trying to make up for them. I might not have made great decisions, but that didn't make me bad, and it certainly didn't make me evil. Evil was where they made their mistake. I might have had doubts, but I came to recognize that I was not evil. If there was one thing I was certain of, it's that I cared about other people. I cared about my friends tremendously and would have put them before myself at any moment. So she goes on to talk about how she knows she's not evil. And I wrote in my margin here, Church of Scientology goes too far. And that's something that I think we see a lot. Scientology takes things just a step too far, and then things come back on them. And in this case, and it resulted eventually in Jenna, I'm sorry, my slippers are coming off my feet. Jenna eventually leaves the church, as we know. But here's where she's saying, I know I'm not an evil person. I know I'm not evil because I'm trying to help my friends and stand up for my friends. That makes me a good person, not a bad person. I've done some bad things maybe, but I'm not a bad person. And Church of Scientology just can't help themselves. They're the ones that push her over the edge. You know, it's just like we see, like Aaron and some of the other SPTVers out there who used to be in Scientology, especially, they love when Scientology does these stupid things because it gives them more material to work with, more videos that they can do, right? So Sandy says, I love that about Jenna. Same. She's a fiercely loyal friend. And I think that Scientology done messed up, as Aaron would say, because they pushed her too far. They just pushed her too far. And they do that so many times, time and time again. They take things just one step too far. And I don't know if they do it intentionally or if they just don't even realize they're doing it. I don't want to say they're stupid, because they're not all stupid, but I don't understand why they do this, why they push people just that last little bit, right over the ledge. And they are shooting themselves in the foot, as the saying goes. And then I'm just going to go to the very last page of chapter 21, page 257. So we're at the end of this section. And I just kind of put a squiggle down this whole last bit here. I'm going to try to paraphrase it so I don't have to read it to you, so you guys don't have to hear me reading a book. So Jenna's being sent home. She's like, where's home? To the Ent base. So then she gets upset. She says, I feel all the excitement drain from my body because Flag was my home. Her grandmother, her Aunt Denise, which is Shelly's sister and Dave's twin, and my cousins all lived in Clearwater. They were public Scientologists, not in Sea Org. All my friends were at Flag, and most important, Martina was here. So she said, as much as I'd struggled here, I'd also found a happiness I'd never known before. Now they were asking me to leave all that behind, along with the hope that I might ever again be happy. Am I coming back? I pleaded. Do I get to say goodbye to my grandmother? We'll say goodbye for you, piped in the commanding officer from behind her. So then the two people came in her room. She helped her shove everything she owns into some bags. She tells them that I don't need to bring everything, but they said I should just in case. I didn't know what that meant, but it scared me. They hugged me as if they had always been great friends and said goodbye. Tom took me to the airport. I asked him to say goodbye to Martina for me, and he promised that he would. And of course, we know he probably doesn't. I haven't read ahead to know that. But all I wrote here was so angry. It just made me so angry that they would do this to this girl, take her away from everything that has her connected. I mean, how do I put this? It's literally everything that she's connected to in the world, and they're taking her away from it. I mean, at this point, I can't remember if her mom's still in the RPF. I think her mom was off the RPF by now, but she doesn't get to see her parents anyway. But at least she got to see some family members there in Clearwater. At least she had friends there. And it just infuriated me. So I'm hoping, and I know because this last section of the book will include her getting out of Scientology. And of course, we know that her life is great right now. So we know there's a happy ending here. But it just made me so angry. I wanted to kind of keep reading just because I wanted to see what happened next. But at the same time, I really honestly didn't have time. I had to really push myself to get through this much. I started a new part-time job this week. So I've been doing paperwork for that and have orientation coming up tomorrow and Friday. So in any case, I couldn't read beyond what I already read. But so that's it for that section. Again, I call it Everything Falls Apart because everything in Jenna's life seems to have fallen apart at this point. And I think, again, Scientology pushed her over the edge. So any final thoughts from either of you, Annette or Sandy, before we sign off? I'm glad you guys joined me. Thank you so much for being here. I was kind of hoping Keela McDonald could come back. She was here last week, but she was not able, I guess, to be here. She has a pretty involved job. So I think that might be part of the issue. She just sometimes can't be here. So I'm going to sign off in a minute unless you guys have any final thoughts. Oh, here we go. Sandy says, it's been a bit since I read the book. This is a great refresher. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming and joining joining us. Please come back next Wednesday. I know it's the night before 4th of July, but if you can be here, I'd love to. We're going to finish up this book. And then, if anyone's interested, Keela McDonald suggested this. I think it was Keela. I'm pretty sure it was. The Bad Cadet, and I don't remember the whole subtitle, but by Catherine Spallino, I think is how you say it. So Annette says, interesting to talk about with others. I agree. And I'm just reading it for the first time. So I've never read Jenna's book. So what I've read, when I read the section and try to finish it in time for the next video. So, but when we're done with this book, after next week, we're going to start The Bad Cadet by Catherine Spallino. That's Catherine with a K, an I-N-E, and then S-P-A-L-L-I-N-O. The Bad Cadet. And there is a subtitle. I don't remember what it is. But that's what we're going to do after this book. So if you can be back next week, please join me. If you're watching this on the replay and you weren't with us here, then please, you know, if you can try to join a live, it's always going to be Wednesdays at 8:30 Eastern Daylight Time until the time change, which I hate. I hate the time change. I wish they would keep it on just one time and leave it there. But it's always going to be at 8:30 my time. I can't really do it earlier, and it's really hard for me to do it later. And it says I already downloaded it. It was on my Kindle Unlimited Choices too. Yep. So cool. You already got the book. Awesome. Cool. So you're ready for our next book. I'm not. I haven't gotten it yet. I actually was looking at it tonight. I can get it on Amazon for about $15. So I'll probably be doing that when I sign off of here. But again, thank you so much. Sandy says thank you. You're welcome, and thank you. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you all again next week. And that says thank you. Yes, pick a time and leave it, please. That's what I'm doing. It's 8:30 Eastern Daylight. Oh, you mean for the time change? Yes. Yes. Just pick a time and stay there. I actually like it on daylight time because living here in Florida, I like being able to get outdoors at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and go swimming or something like that. And I hate the winter time. I hate when it's dark at 4:30. I'm a Southern girl. If I could live in the Caribbean, I would. Anyway, thank you so much, ladies, for joining me, Annette and Sandy. If there's anybody on replay that wants to join us later, please do. We're going to be back here next week. Same time, same bat channel. And yes, I know that ages me. Thanks so much, ladies, and have a good week. We'll see you next week.